Make sure that you turn in your Shakespeare scavenger hunt immediately to the sub if you have not done so. The only section to that would be 3A and 4A. 3A and 4A, there was a miscommunication, so you should be getting yours back today because they were collected. And those are due for you on Monday. But every other class, first period, fifth period, 2B and 4B, you should have those turned into the sub. And if you did not turn those in, they will be considered late. Several of you left them in the classroom, and you had plenty of time to work on them, and you could have done the rest for homework. If you lost it or if you left it in the classroom, then you're going to have to do it or get it off of Canvas and go from there and just kind of get that late grade. But 3A and 4A, just make sure they're due on Monday. Okay, so let's get on to the next assignment. We got some sonnets. Okay, so Shakespeare is known for his plays, but he's also known for his sonnets. And so you're going to need to get out your literary terms, and I'm going to give you 4 literary terms that you'll need to write down. You can pause the video as needed. So the first literary term is iambic pentameter. Now, iambic pentameter, wow, sounds kind of fancy, but it's really pretty simple. It is a line of poetry that contains 5 unstressed and 5 stressed syllables. And an example with that would be Romeo saying in Act 2, Scene 2, but soft, and soft just means wait, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. Okay, so there are 10 syllables in there if you count, and they're going to be unstressed and stressed. For example, now I'm going to make this kind of obnoxious, so, but soft what light through yonder window breaks. There's like a rhythm. Now I'll put some clapping in there. But soft what light through yonder window breaks. Okay, now Shakespeare would do that, and poets would do that, so there's like a subtle sort of rhythm going on. Now, you wouldn't do it as obnoxiously as what I just did, but that's kind of the idea behind it. And for our purposes, you just need to know 10 syllables. 10 syllables. That's what our goal for today. Okay, a couplet, that's the next line. Next literary term, 2 consecutive lines of poetry that rhyme. So as long as men can breathe, their eyes can see. So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Again, that's an iambic pentameter. You can count. So long as men can breathe, our eyes can see. So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Okay, so couplet, 2 consecutive lines of poetry that rhyme. And that's going to be at the very end of a sonnet. And that's what you're going to be writing. So sonnet ends with a couplet. Blank verse, just so that you have some sort of frame of reference for when we start reading Romeo and Juliet. It's unrhymed poetry, but it still has some sort of a rhythm. In Act 3, Juliet says, "And when he shall die, take him and cut him into little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night, and pay no worship to the garish sun." Okay, in this case, what we've got is it's a very poetic sounding, but doesn't have a necessary rhythm. A lot of people say that Shakespeare did that in his plays because he wanted to show more emotion. So iambic pentameter were for people when they were very formal. Blank verse was when it's very emotional, and sometimes when he had characters who weren't very educated. Now in this case, we know that Juliet is very educated, but she's being very emotional. Imagery, now you've had this one forever, so let's not get too worked up about it. Imagery is language that appeals to the senses. Now, I want you to see, this is how Shakespeare uses imagery. Romeo is hitting on Juliet in Act 1, Scene 1, and he says, "My lips, 2 blushing pilgrims," and pilgrims are just people on a journey. "My lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." All right, so he's comparing his lips to 2 people on a journey, and blushing, that has some sort of a romantic connotation, and they're ready to stand to smooth the rough touch with a tender kiss. So you've got imagery with a comparison, you've got imagery with these lips standing ready, and they're they're going to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. That's some imagery. It's a little bit better than like when you're in 2nd grade, it said, "The hot is so blazing that it warms my skin to the touch." Okay, Shakespeare kind of does imagery well. All right, so let's talk about sonnets. Sonnets, it's a 14-line verse that usually has several conventional rhyme schemes. And the rhyme scheme we're going to work on is A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Now, if you've never done this before, it's no big deal. The numbers on the side here represent the line numbers in a sonnet. So first line, second line, third line. The letters, when you're doing rhyme scheme, they represent the last word in each one of those lines. So the first line would rhyme with the third line. Second line rhymes with the fourth line. Fifth rhymes with seventh. Sixth rhymes with eighth. 9, 11, 10, 12, and then GG or couplet are going to rhyme together. Now let's put this into one more step. You've got quatrains. So each one of these sets, so A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, and E, F, E, F, there are 4 lines, so it's called a quatrain. It's basically like a paragraph, but in poetry. So you have 3 quatrains and a couplet. Now again, the couplet is where you have a summary or some sort of ironic twist. It's kind of like the conclusion of a sonnet. So here's your example. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leaf hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But the eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of fair thou owest, nor shall death brag what thou wanderest in his shade, when eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this give life to thee. So notice, okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So each line a poetry, and this line rhymes with that line rhymes with that with that, and that with that. So you have A, B, A, B. A rhymes together, B rhymes together. C, D, C, D. C's rhyme together, D rhymes together. E, F, E, F. They rhyme together. And then G, G. Now, to go on to the couplet a little bit more, I want you to look at these last lines one more time. So this is a very positive poem. It's about somebody that he cares about. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see. So as long as men are alive and eyes can still read, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. You got to think, what is the this? And what most people will argue is that this represents the poem. So as long as our men are alive and eyes can see, so long lives this poem. And this poem I wrote about you and our love will always give life to you. So that means this poem keeps this love for this woman or this person eternal. So as long as people are alive and they're reading this poem, it keeps you alive, which is pretty dang romantic. Anyway, so sonnets are positive, so keep that in mind. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about iambic pentameter. People kind of get worked up about it. We're not going to. Okay, iambic pentameter means just 10 syllables per line. Okay, he used it to show importance. He also used it in his plays because it was a little bit easier to hear because there was a rhythm to it. It would also help the actors memorize their lines because, again, the rhyming and the rhythm. And he could emphasize things because of the stressed and unstressed. So he could put the words he wanted to emphasize on the stressed syllable. Okay, so penta just means 5, and iamb is a foot in poetry, so a combination of syllables. So iambic pentameter is you'd have 5 iambs in a line, and an iamb has 2 syllables, so that's why you'd have 10 syllables. Well, let me go one step further. Okay, so each one of these is called a foot, hence the foot. Okay, so ta-tum, 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 ta-tum. Let's get some words. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? How sweet the moonlight sleeps upon this bank. Okay, so again, how sweet the moonlight sleeps upon this bank. It's got a rhythm to it. And so each one of these is a foot, as unstressed and a stressed syllable. And there are 5 of them, that's why you get iambic pentameter. Okay, and I'm going to put a video on my Canvas site that you can watch. I'm telling you, the first 2 minutes are pretty decent. After that, it kind of falls apart. But it might give you a little bit more of an idea of what iambic pentameter is if you're a little uncomfortable with it. So let's get to your assignment. Okay, so you should have gotten a handout by now. And it's a sonnet assignment. And there's a couple typos on it. I must have been sick when I typed up the final draft. I'm so sorry. But I fixed it on the presentation here. So you're going to write your sonnet, put it in a Google Doc, and turn it into turnitin.com. And that is due on Friday, January 27th, but you will need to work on that in class. So here's what your sonnet assignment should look like. This is a poem that we just went over. If you feel better, you could go ahead and label that the A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. You do not have to do these questions. Okay, kind of went through that already. So here's the actual assignment. Notice when it's due. It's not real subtle. All right, it's worth 100 points. So you go ahead and write an original sonnet, and it needs to have these elements. It needs to have a clear focus, and it needs to be positive. You don't have to write about someone you love. You can, because Valentine's Day is coming. You could write about someone you love, but you could write about something you love. So if you really like, I don't know, basketball, write about basketball. If you really like Cheetos, hey, write a sonnet to Cheetos. It's your call. But it should be something positive. It needs to be 14 lines, and it needs to be in iambic pentameter. Now, for our purposes, 10 syllables in a line is just fine. Okay, don't worry about the stressed and unstressed. Rhyme scheme needs to be three quatrains in a couplet. So that would be A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then G, G. And then here's the rubric that you can look at. The big thing for you guys is the figurative language. You do need to have at least 4, and they need to be labeled. Okay, it's not real subtle. It needs to be highlighted and accurately labeled. So make sure that you've got all of that. And so again, let's look at the rubric. You have 14 lines. It follows the structure, so you have your A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Iambic pentameter, and we're only worried about like the 10 syllables per line. Figurative language, and then the content will be the subject that you're talking about. Okay, so it needs to be positive. Now, if you're struggling with how to even get started, a suggestion I would make to you, just now consider this a rough draft. I would suggest that you write 14 lines of poetry and just try to get them to go into that rhyme scheme. Some students will actually write out like A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G, just to remind them, okay, so these 2 lines need to rhyme, these 2 lines need to rhyme, these 2 lines, these 2 lines, and just write it out. And when you're all done and you're like, okay, I've got my 14 lines of poetry, I've got my sonnet going, then you go back and then you look at the syllables. You're like, okay, now I have to make this line that's 14 syllables or 15 syllables. I have to somehow make that into 10 syllables. What words can I delete? What words can I change? What do I need to do to keep into 10 syllables? That's where some of you will pull your hair out. And that's okay. That's part of crafting. That's part of finding just the right word to fit just the right rhyme scheme and the rhythm scheme. So that's part of the process. So don't get too frustrated with that. But make sure that you're working on that, and then you turn that into turnitin.com by 11:59 p.m. on January 27th. So at this point, this is what you need to be working on. 1, you need to get your sonnet started, and you ideally get it finished before the end of class. We'll see about that. And turnitin.com. If you'd rather, you could work on Apex. Number 20, you can knock that out, and then you can work at the sonnet a little bit later or after you finish Apex. But at this point, no one should have nothing to do. And I'm going to let the sub know that if you are found going to a site where you shouldn't be, that you go ahead and you're going to have to do this all on paper with no computer. Okay, so just make sure that you are working on what you need to. You get everything taken care of. You have a ton to do. So there's that. Now, I'm so sorry. I've been sick all week, and I'm going to be out on Friday, but I will be in school on Monday to help you out. All right, I will talk to you guys later, and have a good weekend.